Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Morton Blackwell, president of the Leadership Institute. It is my pleasure to welcome you here to our Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast. We live in interesting times. Both national parties have now named their tickets. One of them is a one-way ticket to socialism. And so this is going to be a very interesting election season. I encourage you to live tweet today's event. The hashtag is on the screens. Since 1979, the Leadership Institute has trained more than 310,000 activists, students, and leaders. Leadership Institute graduates currently serving in elective office include 3 United States senators and 28 members of the House of Representatives. More than 200 current state legislators are graduates of Leadership Institute training. You have before you our schedule for the upcoming month. I urge you to take a moment to review these schools that we are offering and consider attending one or sending a friend to one of our trainings. And if you're watching online, please visit our website at leadershipinstitute.org/training to see upcoming online and in-person trainings. Bailey O'Donnell is from Nashua, New Hampshire. She's a recent graduate of Texas Wesleyan University, where she earned her Bachelor of Science in Political Science and her BA in English. She has been active on her campus as a summer scholar, an NAIA scholar athlete on the women's golf team. This past semester, Bailey helped launch a chapter of Ignite on her campus to promote women's involvement in politics. She also interned for the Convention of States and their grassroots efforts to bring about an Article 4 convention to amend the U.S. Constitution. Outside of politics and golf, Bailey enjoys being creative and making anything and everything. Following her internship here at the Institute, she'll remain on in D.C. for another semester to intern for a congresswoman. She plans to pursue a trade certificate in welding and a master's in rhetoric. She is currently our studios intern here at the Leadership Institute, and I invite her up to give an invocation and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. If you'll please join me in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the resources and providence to gather all of these people today. We are grateful for your blessings and the freedoms we have in this country, that we are able to gather together freely and discuss ideas and principles. Lord, help us to have ears and hearts to listen as we hear from people who are working hard and seeking to make positive impact in your creation. I pray that we will take all the things said today to heart and become more like you with each day. Thank you for being with us always and placing your protection around us. Please bless the speaker today, and that his words will be impactful and motivating for us to become principled members of society. In your name we pray. Amen. If you'll please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bailey. It's now my pleasure to introduce Matthew Hurt, who will lead us in the program report. Matthew is our Director of Professional Services, where he oversees Leadership Institute's internship program, our career trainings, and conservativejobs.com, which is the Institute's free online job platform. Matthew first joined the Institute in 2009 as a Campus Leadership Program Regional Field Coordinator, and he has been an indispensable member of LI's faculty ever since. In addition to Matthew's work at the Institute, he is very engaged in grassroots conservative organizing in Northern Virginia and actually across the country. Matthew, will you come with your programs report?
Thank you, Morton. Everybody is taking a nap. I won't ruin our distinguished speaker's introduction, but his career in public policy started right here at Leadership Institute. While attending the summer 1997 Youth Leadership School, Jason Miyares, and this is not an intro, I promise, so I'm not. Jason Miyares served as an intern here at Leadership Institute, and though Jason's story is unique and compelling, and you will hear more about it in a few minutes, his pathway to politics is not unlike other prominent conservative leaders about which you may be familiar. Since its founding in 1979, LI has seen more than 1,110 interns pass through our program, which places young conservatives in divisions and departments across LI to give them hands-on experience to help advance LI's mission to identify, recruit, train, and place conservatives in government, politics, and the media. Sure, lots of LI interns go on to live out their lives in the private sector outside of politics. Many of them going on to do their part at home to raise the next generation of conservative leaders. But let's meander through a short list of notable former Leadership Institute interns who have become leaders in the conservative movement. There's Andrew McIndoe, who served as an intern in 2007 before joining the staff at the Heritage Foundation. After leaving the Heritage Foundation as one of its vice presidents recently, he became CEO of Invictus Strategies, which exists to close the funding gap between the right and the left. Or Molly Hemingway, who was an intern in 1995. Molly now serves as senior editor to The Federalist, and you've likely seen her on Fox News as a contributor. There's also Jonathan Garthwaite, who interned in 1995 alongside Molly and is now the vice president and general manager of Town Hall Media. And many of you have heard of Elias Coop Gonzalez, who served in 2021 as an intern before running for and becoming elected to the West Virginia House of Delegates. The impact of former Leadership Institute interns doesn't just stop at the shoreline. Dario Paya, who served as an intern in 1992, returned to his home of Chile and served as the ambassador to the Organization of American States and to found Leadership Institute Chile. Alexandre Pessé, who served as an intern in 2000, went on to marry Kate McKenna Pessé, a former LI staffer. Upon returning to France, in case you couldn't guess, Alexandre founded l'Institut de Formation Politique, which trains the next generation of conservative leaders across France. At home, Alex and Kate now have 6 children. They're certainly doing their part to raise the next generation of conservative leaders. If you are or have ever been a Leadership Institute intern, would you please stand? Let's give these folks a round of applause. As Director of Professional Services, I run LI's intern program. It's not lost on me the importance this program plays in the conservative movement. I'm honored to have Aaron Steiner as our intern program manager. Aaron, would you please stand? Let's give Aaron a round of applause. Aaron served as the communications training intern in fall of 2022 before returning as our office administrator and now as our intern program manager. Aaron oversees a program that welcomes 12 interns 3 times a year, providing housing, a stipend, and A.G. Miyares lived in the same house that they live in today, housing, a stipend, and invaluable training and connections to prepare them to save Western civilization, however they see fit. Thank you so much, Aaron, and thank you to the interns. The deadline to apply The deadline to apply to LI's fall intern program has unfortunately passed. However, if you go onto conservativejobs.com today, you can start the application process or forward it to a future intern in the spring program next year. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matthew. You're doing a great job. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Addison Worth, who will introduce Attorney General Miyares. Addison is currently a senior at California State University, Fresno, where she is a political science major and a Pi Sigma Alpha Honors Society member. On campus, she serves as the president of the Students for Life at Fresno State, where she has grown the group to now become one of the largest pro-life college club chapters on the West Coast. Out of school, she has worked on multiple congressional campaigns and is heavily involved with the educational reform movement. In her free time, Addison participates in musical theater, enjoys traveling the country, and going shopping. After college, Addison plans to obtain her teaching credential with the intention of becoming a high school United States history and government teacher. She is currently our events intern here at the Leadership Institute. Addison, come introduce our distinguished speaker.
Good morning, everyone. Attorney General Jason Miyares' story doesn't start in Virginia, but rather in Havana, Cuba, when his mother, Miriam Miyares, fled communist Cuba penniless and homeless. She immigrated to Virginia and raised Jason to appreciate freedom, fairness, and justice for all. A product of Virginia public schools, Jason graduated with a bachelor's in business administration from James Madison University and a Juris Doctorate from the College of William and Mary Law School. He previously served as a prosecutor in the Virginia Beach Commonwealth's Attorney's Office, where he worked alongside law enforcement to keep the community safe. In 2015, almost 50 years to the day that she fled Cuba, Miriam was able to vote for her son, Jason Miyares, to represent her in the Virginia House of Delegates. After serving for 3 terms in the state legislature, he ran and was elected the 48th Attorney General of the state of Virginia in November 2021. Jason Miyares is the first Hispanic American to be elected to a statewide office in Virginia and the first child of an immigrant to be Attorney General. Since his inauguration in January of 2022, Miyares has been focused on fighting violent crime, improving public safety, strengthening economic growth, combating the deadly impact of opioids and fentanyl, and protecting Virginians from corporate misconduct. His office has secured over $1 billion in opioid settlements for drug addiction and recovery from pharmaceutical manufacturers and distributors, holding them accountable for their role in the opioid epidemic. He kept his promise to Virginians by investigating the 2020 parole board, discovering that they broke the law and jeopardized public safety by releasing violent repeat offenders early with life sentences. Miyares also focused on Operation Ceasefire, a comprehensive approach to fighting violent crime by focusing on intervention and aggressive prosecution of gun crimes. At this time, I please ask that you will hold all questions until the end of Miyares' speech, and this time is my honor to introduce Virginia Attorney General Jason Miyares.
Well, as a former intern, it is great to be back here. You know, when Morton invited me to speak, he called me up. He said, "Mr. Attorney General, do you believe in free speech?" I said, "Of course I do." He said, "Congratulations, you're going to give one." So here I am. I cannot tell you how surreal it is to be in a room in which I sat in these chairs at Wednesday morning breakfasts. I sat in this room when it was used for different LI training schools. And the Leadership Institute, my summer internship here that summer remained, I think, one of the most formative of my time. I did not come from a political family. I did not come from a family that had any significant means. I knew I had an interest in both democracy and freedom. You know, when I found out and I had an inquiry maybe trying to intern in D.C., most internships in D.C. are unpaid. For families like myself that I had to work my way through college, that is an impossible That is just an impossible burden. And then I attended a Leadership Institute training seminar, and they saw something in me at that training seminar. They came back and offered the internship, and to be honest, I said, well, it's going to be an internship I can't do because I can't live in Washington, D.C. for 2 or 3 months unpaid for the summer. I used the summers to work, and they realized they would both housing and give me a stipend, and it made it financially able, and the connections and what I learned that summer to this day still stay with me. Some of the friendships I made at the Sacker House are some of my closest friends. I've been in weddings, and they remain some of my top advisors when I ended up running for Attorney General. And so what the Leadership Institute really is about doing is about planting seeds. It's about planting seeds for the next generation, and it has been a joy to see people that I both served with at LI, trained from, learned from at LI, and it's been touched on a little bit about where it has come. But in many ways also it's the beauty of friendship. You know, you cannot choose your family, but you can choose your friends. And C.S. Lewis said that the beginning of friendship oftentimes is when you turn to somebody and you say, oh, you too, I thought I was the only one. And what LI also does is give you a network of friends throughout the country, and a lot of that goes back to both the genius and the vision of our founder, Morton Blackwell. And so, Morton, I want to thank you for taking a chance on me all those years ago. Now, I never assume in any audience that I'm at that people actually even know what an attorney general is, right? I remember the Sunday night before I was going to be sworn in, we were having our family dinner. I have 3 daughters. They're the diamonds of my heart. And we were around the dinner table, and my oldest daughter asked me, you know, Dad, what am I supposed to tell my friends at school that you're actually even going to be doing? And I don't know if there's any dads with daughters here. But for me, I thought, well, this is my moment to really impress my girls. And so I kind of swelled up and I said, well, I'm going to be the Attorney General for the Commonwealth. I'm going to be the lawyer for the state. So I have over 20 plus sections of the law that report to me, everything from major crimes and emerging threats to civil rights and consumer protection. If the federal government gets out of bounds, I could take them to court. And my daughter just kind of rolled her eyes and she said, Dad, are you actually still an attorney? And I said, well, yeah, actually, by law, you have to be a member of the Virginia Bar to do this job. She's like, great. She's like, and are you still an elected official? And I go, well, of course. I just spent over a year of my life running for this job. Of course. She's like, great. I get to tell my friends at school that my father is both a lawyer and a politician, the 2 least popular professions in all of America. And I just thought, honey, it's all how you frame it. But what I do say, what I tell people, no matter what section that you report to me, whether you are a prosecutor in my major crimes, or whether you're in consumer protection, or whether you're in our solicitor shop taking on the federal government, what I do say, if you walk through those doors in the Attorney General's office in Virginia, I want our mindset to be that you're the people's protector. And that can come in many different forms. That can be protecting your civil liberties. That can be protecting you from federal overreach. You know, many people kind of wonder, you know, in 2021 when we kind of got to that gate, and so it shocked a lot of the people in the world, but didn't necessarily shock me. I mean, they kind of wondered, you know, when do you have a sense that maybe you're all were on a path to victory? And for me, it was in Alexandria at the farmer's market the Saturday before the election. We get there, it's deep red, sea of deep red, and I give some remarks, and I'm standing there, I'm hearing Glenn, and I look to my left, and it's Dana Bash from CNN standing right next to me. And her eyes are really big, and she leaned over to me, only like she was whispering. Maybe she was where the NSA was listening, I don't know. But she said, I think you guys are going to win. But she didn't say that with any joy. It was like somebody had just run over her dog, right? And I said, I think so too. But I remember afterwards a mom coming up to me, and she said, you know, I've never supported somebody from your side of the aisle ever, but I am this time for the first time in my life. And I said, I'm really honored. Do you mind telling me why? And she says, yeah, because so many elected officials have forgotten a very important truth. Never, ever, ever get between a mother and her child. And I said, ma'am, I will not forget that. And that is something that we've had that attitude governing from day one, this idea, and you saw it, it's kind of almost a theme of parents matter. The idea that we're having a debate on whether parents matter is remarkable. If I was to say to you even 10 years ago that the statement, parents have a fundamental right to the education and upbringing of their children, right? If I was to say to you that that was controversial, you would not believe me. There's so many areas that we see right now where we thought that was not really even up for debate. There was a broad consensus on both on the left and the right now is somehow considered controversial. But we saw that from day one. I remember, my welcome to the NFL moment as Attorney General was, we got sworn in at Mr. Jefferson's Capitol, and then the governor brought us up to his office, and he signed a series of executive orders. And then he turned to me, he said, "Congratulations, now you get to go defend these." But one of them was a really controversial. It was simply saying parents can decide. You want your child to be masked 8 hours a day? That's your decision as a parent. But you get to decide. You get to know your child the best on what impact masking in school during COVID is having on both on their mental health, their ability to both learn cognitively. And I remember we had to go to court, and we won in our court case, and ended up being in Loudoun, of all places, the epicenter of that seems to be everything. And I remember this became so vivid for me was after we won the case, we got a call from a friend back home who it had gone on the AP wire that we had won our case, that parents now were empowered in Virginia. And I remember our family friend said, I'm just so ecstatic. Our daughter is just bouncing off the walls that she gets to go to elementary school tomorrow without a mask. And I said, I know, they're annoying. I can only imagine. She's like, you don't understand. For my daughter, when she goes to school tomorrow, she is excited because for the very first time, she gets to see what her best friend at school actually looks like. And you think about what we have put and what we've done with our kids. So whether it's protecting parental liberty and parental rights, or whether Canley is protecting us from a federal government that's too big, out of control, and unaccountable to everyday Americans. I mean, I get to wake up in the morning and sue the federal government. That's a fun job. Yeah. Business is booming. But it does just show, I know we're in the shadow of the most dysfunctional city in all of America, Washington, D.C. They say the best part of Joe Biden's day is every day he gets to wake up and discover that he's the president of the United States. It's quite exciting for him. They say Ronald Reagan can never tell a lie, and Bill Clinton couldn't tell the truth, and Joe Biden simply can't tell the difference. So, but there's a lot of reasons why this city is so dysfunctional, candidly. But one of which has been, you talk about, and all the interns here know this, you go to government class and you're taught the three branches of government are the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. But what has been distorted now is in many ways, effectively, in some ways, the three branches of government is the executive, the judiciary, and the administrative state. There's a study done that showed of all the new laws and regulations passed under Joe Biden, less than 5% have been acts of Congress. Less than 5%. 95% have been what? Executive orders or rules promulgated by these unelected administrative bodies. That is so far from the vision of what our founders viewed, because it goes back to this basic sense of accountability. It's really brought home to me, if y'all remember OSHA, right, and the vaccine mandate, to bring back the Wayback Machine, where the Biden administration used OSHA, which is supposed to regulate, where you put your ladder in your body shop, to suddenly promulgate a regulation that said if you're an employer and you have 100 or more employees, your employees have to be vaccinated or you have to fire them. You do not have a choice. Would impact 100 million Americans. Not a bill in Congress. Not debated in a committee meeting or debated on the floor. Not going through the House and the Senate. No, it was an unelected body. And this was brought home to me by a friend of mine who runs a trucking company in southeastern Virginia. And he called me up and he said, we got this OSHA regulation. I have long haulers that have worked for this family business for decades. They literally sit in the bed of a truck for 8, 10, 12 hours a day where they don't even interact with anybody. And I'm going to have to fire some men and women that have worked for me for decades because they won't get vaccinated. I don't have a choice. And he said, Jason, have you ever tried to call OSHA's helpline? I said, blessedly, no. He said, I did. I came in the office, I got the number, I called them at 8 a.m. in the morning when I got in, and when I left at 5:30 at night, I never was able to get through and talk to a single soul. He goes, I know who my congressman is, I know who my senators are, I know how to reach their district offices and voice a complaint, at least talk to somebody. How do you talk to an unelected body? Why would they even care to hear from me? And it just brought back that when Madison wrote in the Federalist Papers, if you recall, and the genius of our founders, and they were geniuses, but the idea of separation of powers, one of the things they wrote in the Federalist Papers is each branch of government would jealously guard their power, to take you back to civics class. Well, what I've realized right now in this modern age is so many individuals, particularly in Congress, they don't want to have hard votes. Do you think Tim Kaine wants to be on the record voting for a bill that would say an employer has to fire their employees if they're not vaccinated? No. They would much prefer this current arrangement where they get to essentially siphon off their duties and their jobs as Congress. And so Congress now, when I say the three branches of government are the judiciary, the executive, and the administrative state, Congress essentially passes funding bills. They can't even pass a budget. They haven't passed a budget since grunge was popular. The interns, look that up. It's a really old form of music. They pass continuing resolution, and the Senate will confirm or reject judicial nominees or cabinet appointments at the appropriate. That's essentially where Congress is now. They don't legislate anymore. And in many ways, that creates a distortion, I would argue, in our democracy. Think about just how much the Biden administration has attempted to use. I remember my staff telling me that we have a great solicitors team, some extraordinary men and women that work for us, and my Solicitor General, she is just fantastic. But they said, listen, we may have to bring a suit against the USDA. And I said, well, of all the alphabet soup agencies, that's not one we normally tangle with. Why would we be involved with them? And they said, well, the USDA administers a school lunch program for poor, needy children. I said, okay, well, that's fine. I don't have any problem with that whatsoever. They said, well, that's not the problem. Here is the problem. The Biden administration has proposed a regulation, so they'll propose a regulation, you have a comment period, and then they try to implement it. They have a regulation that's right now being proposed that says that if you're a school district and you accept so much as $1 of federal assistance to provide lunch for poor, needy kids, you also have to, as a condition of accepting this money, you have to adopt the Biden administration's transgendered ideology, which means biological boys and women's sports teams and in locker rooms. Think about this. We looked, it would affect over 90% of the school districts in the country. Not a bill in Congress. Not debated on the House floor. This goes back to what I said before. So many members of Congress prefer this arrangement. And so what I realize is your congressmen and your senators, they can complain about this, but they don't ever actually vote on it. And your governors can complain about it. But the ones that actually can bring an action and stop it in its tracks are your state attorneys general. And the great irony is as the federal government administrative state has gotten larger and out of control and unaccountable, it has made these offices so much more important because we like to joke sometimes, us and the other Republican AGs, that we're the sheriff of Washington. And we're proud to wear the badge. Controlling this, and we put the Biden administration on notice. If you try to go through the USDA to do this, you're overstepping your authority. We're going to bring suit, and we're going to take you to court, and we're going to beat you in court. And they backed down, but then they tried to reinterpret Title IX. And we actually then had to bring suit, and we won a nationwide injunction against them, stopping them on this front as well. But it does goes to show you a little bit of just a fundamental different worldview right now of the left versus those that want to preserve what I call the last best hope on earth, to echo President Reagan. It has been an interesting moment for me. Sometimes when I travel around the state, people ask me, what kind of name is Miyares anyway? And I say, well, it's Southern. It's really deep south. But it is amazing to me, the people that most hate socialism are the people that have had experience either directly or through their family of socialism. And so I have to tell you, it was a bit jarring last week when I had some unknown leftist governor at the time that I had never heard of from a state. And then it reminded me he was the governor who stood by and watched Minneapolis St. Paul burn, say that, hey, one man's socialism is another man's neighborliness. The most murderous ideology in all of human history. 100 million dead and butchered, whether it's in the killing fields of Cambodia or in the rice paddies of Vietnam or in the gulags in Cuba or North Korea. It's not neighborliness to go to someone who has spent their entire life's earnings building a business to say, in the name of equity and fairness, we're going to nationalize and take it from you with no compensation. It's not neighborliness to go to someone and go to their home and put a note on the door as they did to Miyares family in Cuba and say the property of the revolution and everything you have in this world, every memory, every photograph, every piece of jewelry, everything that may have sentimental value other than the clothes that you are wearing, suddenly say this is the property of the revolution, of the socialist revolution, all in the name of, quote, fairness and equity. That's not neighborliness. It's not neighborliness to say that criticizing your government somehow is being a counter-revolutionary, and therefore we need to send you to a re-education camp. Gosh, if that's his idea of neighborliness, I'd hate to see what he thinks about somebody who's an enemy. And I got to say, it was further shocking to see that now this person is trying to run for an office and would be potentially one heartbeat away from the presidency. It shows what is at stake, and I would say this last year has told us such a stark contrast between those that are the lovers of liberty and freedom and democracy and those that oppose it. October 7th last year, I think, was one of the most seminal moments. You have those dates that stick with you. 9/11, obviously, December 7th, 1941. I think October 7th will go down on that because what happened on October 7th last year was not just an attack on the West, it was the worst terrorist attack on Americans since 9/11. And I got invited by the Israeli government to go to Israel about a month after the attack in November of last year. And I have to tell you, this was a moment that few things, I think, shocked me anymore. What happened in that trip and then on the trip home still floors me, but crystallized what's at stake. The first day, I was only in Israel for 48 hours. The first day they showed me the GoPro footage and the video of the massacre that had been collected. Hitler tried to hide what he did. It was a celebration of death. That's what it was. Celebration of death. And the next day I went to bury one of the kibbutzes that got hit. And this is particularly difficult for me because I have 3 daughters. And we walked into one of the kibbutzes in a bedroom of what was clearly a little girl's room. And her dolls are still strewn on the floor. Her bed was overturned where she clearly had been trying to hide from the Hamas terrorist, and the best that I can ascertain, she was cowering in the corridor when they executed her because there were still bullet holes and blood on the wall. And I cannot tell you how surreal it was for me to be standing in that little girl's room and seeing death, and 24 hours later being home at JFK International waiting for my connecting flight and looking up at a screen and seeing college students waving Hamas flags and shouting Hamas slogans. At a time when we desperately needed moral clarity, what did we get on our college campuses? Moral confusion. Plato said the 2 most important questions for a civilization is who teaches the children and what do they teach them? And part of LI's mission, I know, is to send students, people that are still in college at the front line on our campuses, and equip them so they can go back to those campuses to push back on the type of moral confusion that is leading to such despondency in this generation. I was speaking at Boise State recently, and I told them, I said, listen, on paper, you all should be the happiest generation in American history. On paper, by how the world judges success, you are the most financially secure generation in American history. You are, on paper, the most highly educated generation in American history. You are also the most depressed. You're the most depressed generation in American history. The highest levels of depression and social anxiety. We've never seen anything like it. And I think there's been a decoupling of purpose, but I also think there has been an entire generation of young people that have been told from day one that somehow their country is irretrievably broken. That they live in this hellish, somehow, society of brokenness. Folks, anybody who's ever fled or come from another part of the world, they will tell you, compared to what they have seen, America is utterly, completely remarkable. There's nothing like it. My favorite thing to do as an elected official is speak at naturalization ceremonies. One of my earliest memories was teaching my mother the Pledge of Allegiance as a child. And then when I was just 6 years old, seeing her become a U.S. citizen. So it is, to this day, my favorite thing to do, to meet new Americans that have done it the right way. And I love to stand in front of a group of Americans that have just taken that oath of allegiance, which is incredibly powerful, and say, welcome home. Welcome to freedom. And I did one in February in Harrisonburg, and the federal judge there, the federal courthouse, did something I'd never seen them do before. But he handed the microphone to these new Americans. And I cannot tell you their testimonies, how powerful it was. I tell my daughters all the time, gratitude's the most underrated of human traits. Most underrated. Ingratitude is the ugliest, but gratitude's the most underrated. And what I saw was such incredible gratitude. I saw a woman that had immigrated here from India, and she said, I have lived in 5 other countries before the United States. I have never seen a country that is as welcome and loving and has such freedom as this country. But my favorite was an elderly gentleman who got up, and his English was very poor. He was in his 70s. And he had his son read a letter to the court. And it went like this. Dear America, this is the greatest day of my life. To stand in front of you as an American citizen. I have 2 children that have both served in the U.S. military, and I have told them I do not have many years left on this earth, but your number one job is to raise your children and your future children to understand this is indeed the most remarkable nation on the planet. Wow. Sometimes you need that outsider's perspective to realize what we have, and also to realize that it is worth preserving. That's why you're here this morning. You're here ultimately because you understand that this country is unique. It is special. It is worth preserving. You're in the trenches. You could be anywhere this morning, but you came here because ultimately, like so many other Americans right now, you're opening the paper, you're going online, or you're watching the news, and you realize there's something off. You're seeing chaos at the border. You're seeing the largest mass migration into the United States illegally that we've ever seen. You're seeing skyrocketing rates of death and addiction that is impacting Americans. You're seeing young people marching on the street in solidarity with a murderous ideology that to this day has 5 Americans hidden in a Hamas dungeon somewhere. Where is this president when 5 Americans are rotting under a tunnel by Hamas? Where is the outrage? Why are the students not marching for them? Instead, they're marching in solidarities with those that think somehow it's okay and justified to butcher innocent men, women, and children. And so you're here because you understand that nothing moves unless it's pushed in the political arena. So that means you need to get involved, whether it's with your local committee, if you're in Arlington or Alexandria or Fairfax, I don't care where your home is, get involved. Get involved with LI. Offer to either teach or volunteer, offer to train that next generation. Because I don't think it's capable for us to sit on the sidelines anymore. I think the stakes are too high. And so I know I'm going to be trying to do my part, but I'm going to ask you to do your part as well. I'm reminded what an Italian immigrant noted the first time they ever laid eyes on the Statue of Liberty. They said, that is the greatest light the world has ever seen since the Star of Bethlehem. I know I feel that on my bones. I know you do as well. It's an honor to be your Attorney General. It's an honor to be the people's protector, standing for both liberty, freedom, and indeed the last best hope on earth. Thank you all. God bless.
Jason has agreed to take some questions. We have to end this about 9 o'clock, which gives time for a lot of questions. And I ask that if you get recognized, don't speak until we have reached you with the microphone.
Morton, we've got our first question back here.
Hey, Jason. Andrew LaPasser here. Quick question for you about the Act Blue letter you sent to them and the suspect donations that they've been receiving for years. Where do you think that's going to go? And then ultimately, does that stop with the FEC or you? I'm just kind of interested about the process.
All right, well, I need to be a little bit careful because I can't really comment too much on active investigations. But from an 80,000 feet view, you have kind of two parallels here. You obviously have the FEC, and I'll let people in the audience determine why the FEC hasn't done anything in their purview. You can reach your own conclusions. But then you also have a variety of consumer protection laws in Virginia, right? And so there's a variety of Virginia consumer protection statutes that are applicable here. But what I have told my team is that our job is to pursue justice without fear or favor, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Probably limited, actually I'm very limited on what I could say, but let's just say it is ongoing and vigorous, and I'll just end with that. But good to see you, Andrew. Good to see you.
Next question.
I think he has the mic.
Do you have any comments about the executive order for parole that Biden has just been undone? Do you have any comments about
Which one?
Allowing immigrants from, I think it was Nicaragua, Haiti, a couple other countries, under the parole program, which is an executive order. It allowed a large number of kind of unsavory individuals to enter the country.
Well, I mean, listen, that is just one element of many to give an idea of just how broken what is happening. If I would never assume anybody here has ever encountered Virginia's finest on our highways and ever gotten a speeding ticket, but if you have, you get notified. They'll stop you and what do? They give you a piece of paper that says we'll see you in court 4 or 5 months from now. What has essentially happened on our border right now is that the federal government, they will do a stop and they will give you a piece of paper that says we will see you 4 or 5 years from now. Right? You'll have an asylum hearing. They know the magic words that they are seeking asylum, and they will give you a piece of paper that says we'll see you in court in 2028 or 2029. So 83% of those that are stopped at the border, these are the people that are stopped, not the people that get through, we don't know where they are literally given this piece of paper. It is a definition of a catch and release program. As I noted in my remarks, it's the largest human migration in the United States in our nation's history. 8.2 million, and that's the conservative number, have crossed illegally. That is larger than the population of 32 United States. That is a staggering number. We've never seen anything like it. And probably what's the scariest is we've now seen from some great work done by the House Oversight Committee is over 250 individuals on the terrorist watch list were apprehended, and over 100 of them were just released back into the general public. Now ask yourselves a question. If you're on the terrorist watch list wanted by the FBI, why would you be trying to sneak into this country? I'm convinced the next 9/11 is not going to be somebody hijacking an airplane. It's going to be somebody that has crossed over or just walked over our border that should have never been here, that's going to target innocent men, women, and children where they live, where they sleep, where they work, where they go to school. And we're going to look back now and think how foolish we were that we could have prevented this. And so I tell often people, I think this year is almost like a national sovereignty election. We're either a nation of borders or we're not. And the idea that we would simply allow this level of illegal migration into the United States with no consequence is simply staggering. So, we have joined other states in different litigation against the Biden-Harris administration. There is a lot of rulings, and this is why President Trump was effective at the border, is there's a lot of deference given to the chief executive on controlling our border. We've never seen anything like this where a chief executive just decided not to even try, which is exactly where we're at. And it's why the stakes, I think, are so high this year.
Hello. I wanted to ask, what leverage do the states have in response to education mandates from the federal level? Like, what's your best constitutional argument for that? And how can they respond to the CRT, the DEI, the transgender ideology mandates that are coming down from the federal level?
Well, that's the great, not to get in the whole legal shop here, but that's kind of the great, whether it's education mandates, pick whatever the mandate. The question has always been, and this is where the ruling overturning Chevron deference was, I think, a critical moment in jurisprudence, because it forces Congress now to do their job. But what had happened before is you had, for 30, 40 years, this Supreme Court ruling Chevron that essentially said, if there's ambiguity, then these unelected bodies can simply decide what it really means. And so it almost gave an incentive for Congress to pass ambiguous codes or even administrative rulings, and then they also oftentimes as well, they would realize that liberal courts would interpret it. So, for example, when we took the Biden administration to task on Title IX, Title IX is a civil rights law that's been on the books since 1972 for over 50 years. And then suddenly, magically, the Biden administration declared through the Department of Education that they were going to reinterpret Title IX to say, and Title IX was supposed to protect against discrimination against sex in education. And that's a lot of when you say, we've heard, usually most people when they hear Title IX, that means we have to have equal number of college athletic scholarships for men and female athletes, right? Well, the Biden administration suddenly said, well, we're going to ignore what has been 50 years of interpretation to suddenly say, well, that also means Title IX also covers, quote unquote, discrimination against trans athletes. So one of our arguments is we took them to court overstepping that essential mandate, which would have completely transformed women's sports, is you've stepped your statutory authority. You've never had the authority given to you under this law to suddenly interpret this in a way that has never been. And it goes back to one of my themes has been, is that Congress doesn't want to have these votes. Do you think a Democrat in a swing district wants to be on the record with a vote like this? Of course not. And so they much prefer this type. And that's where we then can go forth, whether it's the Department of Education or pick the administrative agency, and say, you have so overstepped the statutory boundaries that have been granted to you by Congress. You're now essentially becoming a de facto legislative body. And that's where it's been very, very important to get involved and get in the trenches. And it goes back to what I said before, is I think this creates a distortion, right? When there's no sense of accountability, when people feel like my government is simply not accountable to everyday Americans, it creates an enormous sense of frustration in our democratic system. And I just am a big believer. I mean, there's a lot of weeping and gnashing of teeth when Chevron was overturned this Supreme Court term. But what we're really talking about is making sure that legislators that are accountable at the ballot box to their voters have to actually do their job and not just rely on these unelected bodies. Really novel idea, and we hope to get back to that.
Mr. Attorney, I have a question, and I'd like to ask particularly about the largest state, one of the largest states in the Union, that's the state of migration. What are we doing to prevent them from voting in the election?
Let me check real quick if this is public yet. Hold on. Just give me a sec. Okay. Stay tuned. I was on the phone with the governor and I were talking pretty late last night. You're going to see an announcement today. I would say this, and one of the big concerns, obviously, is if somebody checks that they want some type of driving privileges, they could check a box saying they want to register to vote, and there's no proof of citizenship. That is something that we're both quite aware of. That is something we've worked with ELECT to clean up, and that is something you're going to see an announcement on later today. I was hoping it was already out, but I just got a note from my chief of staff that it should be coming out later before 2 o'clock. I don't want to steal the governor's thunder.
I was told by the elect officer trainer that they're instructed to give them a provisional ballot.
It's quite true, but this is what we do. We're working with ELECT and our registrars and make sure there's uniformity. That's one thing that we've seen in the past was a problem, is that how some registrars interpreted the law in, say, Fairfax was different than, say, Galax, and no, it has to be uniform. So we're addressing those type of issues, I can assure you.
Mr. Attorney General, Rick Tyler from the Leadership Institute. One of the other titles for Attorney General of Virginia is Governor in Waiting, and I wondered if you would honor the tradition of the great Commonwealth of Virginia, and will you be running for governor?
Are you sure you're not with the Washington Post? They must ask me that on a regular basis. I am focused right now on this election, not just what's happening nationally, but also federally. And so I'm focused on that, and at the appropriate time, I'll make the appropriate announcement. But I think the stakes going to be higher, and I want our focus to be on what's on the ballot this fall.
Hey, Mr. Miyares, hey, thanks for coming out today. This is my first time at the Leadership Institute. My buddy Alec invited me. Glad he did. It's thought-provoking. I have a question about Virginia's history, which is related to the governors. So I know Thomas Jefferson, he wrote the Virginia Declaration of Religious Freedom. And I know there's like a story there of how like Madison had something to do with his run for governor with that bill. I don't know if you know about it. And also I'm curious if Patrick Henry like Frankensteined that for the Constitution.
Well, Virginia has so many unique stories. People asked me recently, why is Virginia one of the only states where the governor can't run for re-election, for example? And I said, well, blame Lord Dunmore, the royal governor of the Revolutionary War. Patrick Henry got a little bit too loud and obnoxious in the General Assembly, and Governor Dunmore then abolished the General Assembly, forced him to meet at Raleigh Tavern in Williamsburg, which is still there. And when they kicked his rear end back to England, the new constitution that they constituted in 1776, in which Patrick Henry was our first governor, they said, we're going to allow you to serve one term. And at the time, it was just a one-year term. And then they eventually got to one 2-year term and then one 4-year term. But that's a little bit of the great irony is Virginia has, always been somewhat wedded to our past. That debate was a great, interesting moment. James Madison was never... I think, yeah.
You got to if you hold the microphones at the end, it covers the antenna. So.
Oh, no. Can you all hear me? Okay, there we go. James Madison was never governor, but he was in the House of Delegates from Orange County, and it was something he shepherded through the Assembly, the Virginia Declaration of oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank on my name. Religious freedom, thank you. Virginia Declaration of Religious Freedom, who Jefferson was so proud of. He actually had that to be put on his. He didn't put that he was president of the United States on his. Above his tomb, he put that he was that was one of the authors of that and the Virginia, and obviously the Declaration of Independence. You can't interstate, and Patrick Henry, if you look back at the great debate that was actually happened when they adopted the U.S. Constitution, this goes to show you a little bit is Patrick Henry's big argument was, this was before they had the Bill of Rights, his big argument against Virginia ratifying it was there's nothing to prevent the federal government, from getting too big, out of control, and taking away your liberties. And the counter-argument from James Madison and others was, wait. They only have the power explicitly given to them. So there's no power written in the Constitution that could take away your freedom of speech or your freedom of religion. And Patrick Henry said, I don't care. I don't trust what this can transform to. And Patrick Henry and others, and George Mason was very influential as well, which what put James Madison put in the Bill of Rights almost to just assuage their fears. Because his argument was, well, if it's not explicit in the Constitution, the federal government doesn't have our power, this is unnecessary. But it's what I've tried to point out particularly to students. Our Constitution is the first written constitution in all of human history that actually limits government. This has never happened in all of human history. When I call what we have the American miracle. And when you limit government and you empower individuals, what do you see? You see human flourishing happen. That is utterly remarkable. And so protecting both religious freedom and I think is one of Jefferson's great legacy moments. Obviously, he wrote the birth certificate of a nation when he wrote the Declaration. But you can't separate U.S. history from Virginia history. It's part of the reason why I'm so proud to both be a Virginian and to serve in public office.
All right. We've run out of time. I thank you so much for coming. What an inspiring speaker you are. Comment was made about Virginia's pride, about our future, about our past, and we clearly have a remarkable past here in Virginia. Somebody once asked me, how many Virginians does it take to remove a light bulb? And the answer is it takes 3. One to handle the bulb, and the other 2 to discuss how good the old bulb was. Mr. Attorney General Jason, thank you so much for coming. Let me present to you an